Welcome to the Fintech Times News and Views podcast. Established in 2016, the Fintech Times is a global multimedia news outlet centered around the world's first leading fintech newspaper. We report on the latest and brightest ideas from the fintech world. Follow the conversation using hashtag TFD News and Views and follow us at the Fintech Times. Hello, and welcome back to the Fintech Times News and Views podcast. We are sadly a man down this week, but I'm here with Francis. Francis, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well this week, Polly. Yeah, it's been a very busy week. Being quite exciting, really. I feel like we've had a lot of good news come in, and I'm excited to sort of see what topics we're going to be talking about today.
Absolutely. It's been a great week for fintech, it seems. But of course, even though we are missing Tom this week, we have a very special guest joining us in his stead. So I'm thrilled to welcome Adam Katz onto the podcast. Adam, how are you doing?
Very well. Thank you, Polly and Francis, for having me.
We are so thrilled to have you here. We're so excited. We always love having a guest on this podcast because it's nice to get some fresh insight into when we're talking about the news and discussion and things like that. So Adam, of course, you are the founder and CEO of Kooltra. It'll be amazing to get a little bit of an introduction as to yourself and to Kooltra as well and the kind of things that you do.
Happy to. My background, I got started early in the foreign exchange industry, working for a non-bank foreign exchange company before really fintech was a big thing. It was a really unique spot to be in because I got to see what the company did was provide liquidity to a lot of the early fintechs, companies like Currency Cloud that became major players in the industry. And so I got to see all of these companies start to grow, and really all of the demand that they were getting for their offerings and how they were tailoring them for customers. But what I noticed is there were a lot of people competing, and everyone can't go raise $500 million and build an entire tech stack by themselves. And so what I saw was an opportunity to provide technology infrastructure to help foreign exchange companies and payments companies to get products to markets quicker. And that's both obviously challenges like fintechs, but that's also traditional players who need to digitize their offerings so that they can do their best to keep up.
Awesome. Well, like I said, it's so great to have you here. We're thrilled to get your insights into a few things. I know you've brought an article with you for us to discuss today. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that we're going to be looking at a little bit later on?
Yeah, happy to. And it's one that's very close to my heart. I chose an article that discusses how incumbents are adjusting their offerings to become more accessible. They're obviously traditional banks are doing a lot to keep up. They're partnering with fintechs in all different types of ways. They're trying to make their own technology investments, both internally and also, again, bringing in fintechs offerings. And then also there's, a lot of data that's available now. There's a lot of new tools that are available now. And so we're seeing obviously traditional financial institutions start to really leverage all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we will get to that a little bit later on. But first, Francis, you are going to be presenting our article. So why don't you just kick us off and tell us a little bit about more what you want to talk about today?
Yeah, awesome. So today I wanted to really talk about, you could make a link between Adam's article and our own, because today we're talking about the BNPL market and how it's expected to grow across the Philippines as trust rises among local consumers. And I suppose a big reason for this, without diving into the article straight away, is because of its accessibility, which is, of course, what we're going to be talking about later. And I just think it is a really interesting article, as we had some findings from Unicash, an in-app and in-store financing solution provider, that found that BNPL in the Filipino market is expected to contribute 6.7% in gross merchandise value to the digital economy in 2024. And the reason I found this so interesting is because digital payments themselves, according to some research from Statista that we found, are expected to reach, or were expected to reach, around 43.65 billion this year. And BNPL plays a massive part in this because of its accessibility, because of how many people really use it. And another thing that I found interesting, sort of supporting today's article, was we've previously had some more research from Unicash as well that found that a lot of Filipino users who use the technology are using it to really make small ticket purchases, as they say, sort of around 5,000 Filipino pesos, which equates to about $86. And what I found so interesting about it is because a lot of the time when we think about BNPL, we think about these like really expensive things that or it's an alternative to credit is a lot of the time how it was marketed at the start. But it's interesting to see that how a payment method that has been linked to, expensive, paying over time, these big, difficult purchases that might not be able to be made otherwise. It's interesting to see that BNPL is still being used in a way to really make these small purchases as well. So, just some interesting stats from today's article is that Unicash compared the volume of the Philippines BNPL market from 2020 to 2023 to the growth rate of the Philippine digital economy during the same period, and it predicted that BNPL's GMV contribution this year will be higher than both 2023 and 2022's values. And it notes that BNPL has become a preferred payment model for both online and offline retailers, enhancing their competitiveness and contributing to the overall digital economic landscape, especially in a country dominated by micro, small, and medium sized enterprises. So, what I wanted to talk to you guys really was, does it come as much of a surprise that we're seeing BNPL be so widely adopted in the Philippines? And is this something sort of exclusive to the region, or do we think that, we will see similar, I suppose, adoption of BNPL in for smaller items and businesses as well, offline and online, as the article says? So, yeah, Adam, I'll go to you first. What do you think? Do you think it's sort of exclusive to the Philippines, or is this a trend that we're going to be seeing everywhere?
Well, it's very interesting that you highlight like the alternative, an alternative way to get credit, and doing it on smaller transactions, because I think we take for granted in the US and Canada and the UK that whenever you use your credit card, you're being granted credit and you can buy it now and pay for it later, and it just makes the transaction so smooth for both the merchant and for the individual. And so when you don't have as built out or accessible access to credit for making those small transactions, if it's a cup of coffee, to me it makes a lot of sense that a fintech solution like BNPL will come in and fill that gap. I worry uh, as the usage of it grows, I get a little bit worried. I've always looked at BNPL as almost like a digital layaway. You go like back to the 1930s and the Great Depression, and it allows you to do a lot of consuming today that you're going to have to pay for in the future. And I hope that it continues to be used in a very responsible way. Thus far, it has seemed such.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I know we've spoken about it on the podcast before, but I feel like a lot of the time that's where the role of financial institutions really comes in, because it's their duty to the consumers to ensure that they know how they're using their products properly and not fall for that trap of, as you just said, buying everything now, consuming everything now, and then not having the ability to pay for it later. Another thing that I've sort of, as you were saying, that sort of stuck out to me was, I think a lot of the time, due to sort of, perhaps, I don't know really why it's happened, but like Klarna and stuff, when we think about it, I always seem to associate BNPL with pay in three. And I think that's why a lot of the time when people say they're using it on smaller items, it can be very easy to almost lose track of how much you're really paying, because it goes from, as you said, let's say it's $5 to buy a coffee somewhere. Instead of it just being sort of $5 at the end of the month, and that, it then becomes split into 3, 4, 5, 6, or whatever it might be, just for a very small item. And I think that's where the risk really comes in, because you start to lose track, and it's hard to sort of really have it in one place how much is owed when, and then that's where the problems can arise. And I think, again, going back to what we were originally saying, that's really where financial institutions can step in and sort of be a bit of a guidance for these organizations.
And I would argue there's a bit of the great thing with innovation and accessibility is that more and more firms can offer these solutions. The thing that gets more difficult is that then it's more fragmented, and then you might be in a spot where you got credit for an individual who's in rough times, and ends up taking credit from a bunch of different places, and there isn't that central mechanism to kind of help protect them from potentially getting too far ahead of themselves. But on the other hand, then you have all the innovation, and you have access to the credit and access to these products and new ways to be able to get consumers what they're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. It really is. In the right hands, it's fantastic, but used it inappropriately or incorrectly, that's where the problems really lie. Polly, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I just echo a lot of what you and Adam have said. Definitely kind of like this idea of the wariness about buy now, pay later. Like Francis, I know we have talked about it a lot in the past, both when it was first starting to, be quite a trending thing in the industry a couple of years ago, and then sort of, even more recently as to what it's evolving into. I think, as you guys have already said, it all comes down to how you use it, right? And I think that is the case with a lot of financial products and a lot of things like this. It all comes down to using it correctly, and as long as you use it correctly, you're not going to have the the worries or the risks that maybe are associated with it. I think in terms of this article specifically, I do find it interesting to see such a big uptake in the Philippines. I'm not sure why I find that interesting. I guess in my head I always just associate buy now pay later and similar kind of products to be like a very Western thing, like a very UK and US centric thing. Obviously, that's wrong, but I guess that's where my surprise is coming from, seeing it as a very Western market. So seeing that the Philippines and Asian markets are seeing it and the increased usage, that's really interesting to me. And I guess it kind of goes to show you how much of a useful tool buy now pay later is that we're starting to get into all these other big markets and other different markets where that obviously people like it and people are using it because the usage is going up and the uptake is going up. So obviously buy now pay later isn't, I don't think, the big scary thing that we all thought it could be when it was first coming into the scene a couple of years ago. But again, it's like you guys were saying, it's just something that you really have to keep an eye on and watch and make sure it's all being used right and all being used effectively.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting there that you sort of brought up that these potential, I suppose, regional trends that we see, and that like you said, you might not have expected to have seen it there. But I think, and this will tie in very nicely with that Adam's article as we get to it now, is that it's the accessibility of BNPL. It's extremely accessible and very easy for people to use, and they're it's at their fingertips. So it really is, a very interesting space, and I think that will sort of lead us nicely onto the next article, really, about accessibility. So, Adam, over to you.
Yeah, great. And yeah, just wrapping up there as well. The I think it's also a great example of products getting developed in developed markets and then being able to adapt them and make them really fit well and work in emerging markets. And we've seen a couple of really good cases of this over time. Things like microloans that have had such a positive impact in emerging markets and finding these innovative ways to do things like get credit out. So yeah, I mean, on that note, the article that I'm going through is how are incumbents adjusting their offerings to become more accessible. And this really spoke to me because I'm constantly working in my job with traditional financial institutions and with fintechs. And so I see a lot of partnering with fintechs. Yeah, firstly, looking at how fintechs are really partnering with traditional financial institutions, and we're seeing things like white labeling of the fintech solutions by the financial institution areas where they don't have the full the ability to staff a full team. They don't have enough demand across their client base. Potentially, it's for a certain segment of their client base. And so suddenly they're now able to go and partner with a fintech and be able to offer out a solution that they can offer out at the right price and it makes sense on their side. And very often nowadays we see financial institutions, which I think is a big change from the past, where they just want to offer out more, be more accessible, and offer more tailored solutions. And it's not just about the bottom line. And so hopefully we see more of that trend. That's something that we're seeing a lot. Another thing that another way we're seeing fintechs moving into traditional financial institutions is financial institutions themselves are starting to, well, they have been for a while digitizing their offering. But what we're seeing is more and more those financial institutions being willing to work with startups and being willing to work with fintechs. And across areas, I think onboarding has been a great place. If we think about what it was like opening a bank account or getting a mortgage or whatever process you were going through with a bank 10, 15 years ago compared to today. And that's entirely fintech innovation coming in and helping the banks to be to move faster. And there was an example here in the article about how Zelle in the US improved their onboarding process. And that would be something that would be very difficult in the past to actually get to. The next area, which is really changing things as well, which I think goes back to Francis's article, is the data that's accessible now. So it's become a lot easier for financial institutions to get information on people that may not have had good credit data in the past, and they're actually looking at alternative ways. I've met many founders who are doing various types of adjudicating models on the credit side and bringing in all types of data on people. A little scary as well that all of this data exists and is accessible by third parties, but there's been a very positive impact on that side as well. And lastly, an area that's the article covers an area that for me is again very close to my heart, which is really the verticalization of financial services, is how I like to think about it. And the article talks about how you're able to now financial institutions more and more are targeting unbanked populations. And very unique offerings. There was a party I thought was really interesting about content creators and like specific financial services for content creators. And so as we start getting into this hyper verticalization, as I like to think about it, you're able to really get to that client, that experience that user's looking for in a way that's never been possible before. And the article touches on, which I guess you have to nowadays, AI and ML, and how that's going to kind of accelerate that even further as you're able to kind of leverage, as you start segmenting customers, really leverage all of that data to get more and more targeted solutions out to customers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a really interesting and really important thing. And I know it's something that we focused on a lot with our like Fintech for Good coverage last month, and it was last month with our Fintech for Good coverage last month. And I mean, Francis, thinking about sort of this kind of thing as well, I guess, where do you see the accessibility coming in with incumbents and things like that, and merging with the fintechs? What are your thoughts on this?
I think really there is no sort of one of like the things that Adam listed or that are listed in the article. There is no sort of one solution that sticks out above the rest. I think they all need to be considered equally, and with value being placed on each of them individually. Because I think if you're just partnering with fintechs, I mean that's a great start into sort of making, I suppose, some certain financial offerings more accessible. But then who is that really becoming more accessible to? I mean, it's very easy to say accessibility is happening, but who is it targeting? Who are you trying to be more accessible to? You have to think of the underbanked and unbanked communities that perhaps haven't had access to finance in the past. And I think that's really, for me, where we can see a difference from incumbents, because they're the ones that are really, they've got the reputation to make a difference. And I think by partnering with fintechs and integrating the new technologies like Adam mentioned, AI and machine learning, and really having a focus on who they want to be more inclusive to, I think that is the recipe for Fintech for Good. I don't think there's necessarily one thing that stands out above the rest. I think it's really an amalgamation and sort of a merging of all of them put together that really can increase accessibility.
I totally agree, and it's interesting. Ultimately, to me, what accessibility is reducing the costs of accessing these services. Obviously, how you access the services is important as well, but I think mobile's kind of won that battle, and now it's always easy to distribute. But if you can lower the cost, so we work with a fantastic company in Africa called On Afrique, which has really brought this all together, where they've built this massive network of telecom companies and banks and money transfer operators they come together to offer mobile payments seamlessly for the end user. They've got hundreds of millions of users on their network. And you look at, obviously for me it's the FX side. When you look at the cost of doing a cross-border transaction in Africa, I mean it's egregious. You're looking at 5-10%. I'm from South Africa originally, and my dad's sister sent him a couple $1,000 about 6 months ago, and the bank, they wanted 22% to make a transfer to Canada. And so that's really going to hold back from it being able to do business, from being able to, send family money abroad and friends money. And so really, if you can bring down the cost, and what I'm very focused on personally is how do you bring down the cost of the underlying technology that actually enables the financial institutions to deliver the service. Because I think we all like to think that banks are just rolling in it, and in many cases that is the case. But also they have to be able to cover their risk. I mean, especially when you're dealing in emerging markets, you're just carrying the local currency. It's losing value constantly. And you need innovative solutions to actually deliver the solution at the right price.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's all really interesting. It's such a really interesting topic to bring up. So thank you so much, Adam, for choosing that article. That does bring us to the end of the discussion portion of the podcast. So if you want to hear anything more about anything that we've talked about today, head on over to thefintechtimes.com. There's plenty more news and insights over there. But now we move on to the best portion of our guests when we have a guest on the podcast, and that is our quick fire questions, where I'm afraid, Adam, you're about to be put in the hot seat for a very severe grilling, so I hope you're ready for this.
Bring it.
Fantastic. Okay, so we'll start off with an easy one. What fintech platform do you use in your everyday life?
So that should be an easy one. So in Canada, I think we're one of the few places that are really behind on open banking. And when I chat to friends in the UK, for example, everyone uses all these apps, aggregate all their accounts, and can see everything in one place. Here it's we're behind. So in Canada, we've got Interac, which is really, they have the access where no one else does. And so you'd think that I use it every single day pretty much. And you would think what I will give them a lot of credit for is, even though they've had that unique access, they've done a really great job of continuously innovating and bringing good solutions to market. I also trade a lot, and I always loved. I love interactive brokers. I love plugging it. I have no reason to plug it. I just think it's a great service, and they're just not as flashy as everyone else.
Awesome. I do take it for granted how good our open banking system is here in the UK. Like, not to rub salt in the wound or anything, but yeah, I do forget that it's not necessarily a thing in other countries. So that's a really good answer. And then so our second question, very topical at time of recording. If you could compete in any Olympic sport, which one would you choose and why?
So I would probably have to take table tennis.
Oh, that's the most
Um,
fun,
I
surely.
Sorry.
That's the most fun. They look like they're good. I always love watching table tennis.
I mean, I would, if you asked why, I would probably say it's the right amount of athleticism. Not that I will say I'm dripping of sweat when I play table tennis. I take it very seriously. But I love the finesse in the game.
Yeah,
It's the right amount of finesse versus physical exertion.
I love that. That's a good answer. Francis, do you have one? Your Olympic sport?
Oh, I did. I was speaking to somebody the other day about it, but I can't remember now. I think I
So they
said
don't. They don't. They don't.
archery.
Yeah, they don't play ice hockey in the Olympics. Do they
They
play ice
don't
hockey in the
know.
winter?
They do in the Winter
In the
Olympics.
winter.
Yep.
Yeah, but no, in the normal Olympics, I think I would say archery, something that doesn't involve running, because I would be out of breath straight away.
I love that. Amazing.
But yeah, let's. Why don't we move on to the next question? So, what has been the biggest regulatory change to impact the foreign exchange market?
Oh, that's a meaty one. I'll say obviously foreign exchange touches a lot of areas, kind of retail, institutional. So there's been quite a few changes over the years. I mean, on the retail side, regulators really clamped down on giving too much leverage to consumers who are just blowing up and really gambling money away. So they've really tightened up on that, and there's been a lot of scams as well. So they've really tightened up on capital requirements. On the institutional side, it's really been derivative trade reporting has really rocked everyone since the global financial crisis. And actually, this year, next year is they're kind of redoing everything. So it's really rocking the industry right now. There's a lot of upgrades that are happening. And the last one being payments. I'm all about the intersection of FX and payments and the increased scrutiny on anti-money laundering. We've seen that in Canada a lot with the regulators here. We just rolled out a whole new suite of APIs, and they want hundreds of data fields on every payment that gets made, so that they can kind of track things down. So yeah, constant changing landscape on the regulatory side in foreign exchange.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like it's definitely, we say it so much on the podcast, but like you said there, it will definitely be one to watch as you said, things are changing over the next couple of years.
100%.
On to a topic that's very near and dear to my heart now. What is your favorite go-to takeaway?
Go-to takeaway. I would have to say Thai food.
Oh,
I'm
that's
a
a good
big
choice.
lover of spices. I'm a big lover of very spicy food. So I will always take a good Thai dish. I do find I was with a guy on my team from the UK yesterday. I do think Canada has the UK beat in Thai food.
Ooh.
So we don't have a lot of Thai takeaways around here. Maybe
Not
you
sort
do
of.
in London, Francis, but around
Yeah, I was gonna say in London we definitely do. I don't know about
I've
sort
Thai
of really
restaurants,
big.
sure, but not like good
Oh, I
Thai.
suppose, yeah. How about you, Polly?
God, you can't go wrong with Chinese. I don't think any.
It's a
I
classic.
do love
It's a
pizza.
classic.
Pizza is like my go-to meal, but when it comes to like a takeaway, Chinese all the way.
Just be grateful that we have access to everyone's food from around the world.
Oh, honestly,
It's so true, especially in London. I feel like London literally has anything that you could imagine, it will be there.
you guys are so lucky in London. Honestly,
It
it
is,
is a
yeah,
struggle where I live.
absolutely.
And then well, this is quite a nice question, actually. What gave you the idea to create Kooltra and when you were founding the company?
Yeah, so I think I touched on it briefly before, but the I just saw all of these companies coming out with these offerings. And if you look at a lot of the big fintechs, you look at like Airwallex, for example, has been really impactful in a lot of places. They raised almost $1 billion, built everything from scratch, your Revoluts, your TransferWises. And I just had the view that everyone can't invest hundreds of millions. If you want to talk about accessibility and you want to talk about actually getting solutions to all areas of the market, it can't cost everyone $1 billion to get up and running. So it was all about how can we get the way we think about it is how can we really enable subject matter experts to express their solutions technically at the lowest possible cost, so that they can solve the unique problems for their clients. Because a lot of our customers have, 2,000 clients, 500 clients, 5,000 clients. We're not talking about tens of millions. And so you're really getting into those kind of like unique offerings.
And last but not least, to finish on another sort of merry note, what is your favorite holiday that you've ever been on?
It's a great question. Actually, I just came back from Spain last week, which I absolutely loved. I'd never been in Spain before. But I will say, that, the last 8 years or so, I've pretty much just worked around the clock and been very lucky to have my partner, now my wife, who put up with the fact that I would work until I was absolutely ready to kill over. And then we'd go down to 7 Mile Beach in Jamaica, and the water is crystal clear, and I just go down there and I just swim for a week straight. You can't get me out of the water. And it's I wouldn't say it's a specific holiday, and it's not generally where I like to. I like to be more kind of active and traveling around, and it was very nice in Spain. There's so much to see and do. But yeah, that's been very memorable for me over the years because it's been my pause and reset. And unfortunately, I'll find myself in the water thinking about work after just a couple days, but I try very hard not to.
That definitely sounds pretty nice. I think, yeah, I could do with a bit of that right now. But anyway, thank you so much, Adam, for taking our questions. Loved all of your answers. We are getting to the end of our podcast today, but we have one little bit left over, which of course is what I learned this week. So Adam, here at the Fintech Times, as you can imagine, we get so much news and information crossing our desks that we're learning something new all the time. So we thought it'd be fun to share a few little bits with our listeners. So Francis, straight to you. What have you learned this week?
So as we rounded out our Fintech for Good monthly theme, we looked at impact platforms and what they're doing right, and what the successful ones are doing right. And one of the answers that I found particularly interesting was from Nick Chandy, the CEO and co-founder of Forwardly, who said, don't come up with problems to solve the problems that are in front of you. And it sounds something so simple, but I feel like a lot of organizations, to sort of make themselves sound good, would be like, we've solved this problem. And it's like, right, but who's actually having that issue? So I think really sort of setting out to and listening to your consumers to find out what their issues are and dealing with those problems, I think that is a key to success.
Yeah, really interesting. Thank you, Francis. Adam, I'm going to ask if there's anything you've learned this week that you'd like to share with the podcast.
So I was literally nonstop with clients this week. It was a wonderful week in Toronto with my team in town. I would say, so I've actually not even caught up on the news this week, to be quite honest. But what I was reminded about is the value of in-person interactions. We spend so much time nowadays on Zoom having discussions, and when you get together in person, you suddenly realize you have discussions you wouldn't usually have with both your team and your customers, and just being close to customers. Actually, very aligned with what Francis just said. Just being with customers, if you're on a Zoom call, it's because there's a specific purpose. Someone's raised an issue from a high level or whatever. But when you just sit down with the users, you suddenly hear all of this amazing feedback that you would never have come up with, heard about if it was in a more structured setting.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I love that. And then my one for what I learned this week is that the UK's current account switch service has facilitated over 1.4 million switches in the past 12 months, which I just thought was an absolute crazy number. But anyway, that does bring us to the end of our podcast now. Adam, thank you so much for joining us today. It has been a pleasure to have you on as our guest. It's been really great to hear your insights. So thank you so much for being here. We hope you can join us again another time in the future. And hopefully that's been pretty okay for you to be here as well. We've not been too scary for you.
Thank you so much. No, it was great to discuss with you guys. And yeah, hope to be back soon.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, Francis, as ever, it's been great to chat with you about fintech. And to Francis and Adam, I hope we'll see you guys very soon.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Adam. And yeah, see you next week, Polly.
Thanks for listening to the Fintech Times News and Views podcast. Don't miss next week's episode and continue the conversation using #TFT News and Views and follow us at the Fintech Times.